From the stolen territory of the Wolastoqey, Pescatoo, Mukati, and Mi'kmaq, this is the NB Debrief. I'm your host, Tobin Haley.
We're not seeking to run these businesses. We're seeking the land back from those businesses.
That's Madawaska First Nation's Chief Patricia Bernard. In this episode of the NB Debrief, we will hear from her about the Wolastoqey Nation's title claim that names J.D. Irving and NB Power. We will also hear from woodlot owners and farmers, Daimen, Hardie, and Gareth, Davies. And we will talk to them about their views on forestry and the treaties of peace and friendship. Thank you so much for meeting with us and for sharing your time and your expertise. The first iteration of the title claim was filed more than a year ago and was amended last week, as I understand it. Can you give the viewers a little bit of history on this historic title claim?
Sure. So, clearly the claim is about original ownership of the land that dates back pre-contact. And so over time, one of the reasons an Aboriginal title claim has not been filed before is because the idea of Aboriginal title is a Canadian legal principle that was identified as early as 1973 with the Calder decision. And so from there, moving forward, the Delgamuukw decision, which was another case that went to the Supreme Court that outlined what the legal test was to determine what Aboriginal title, where Aboriginal title lies. And then just as recent as 2014, the Chilcotin decision of the Supreme Court recognized actual Aboriginal title in an area of British Columbia. So, we've known always that we've never ceded or surrendered our land from our traditional territory. And following the Canadian law and Canadian case law with respect to Aboriginal title, we've always known that this has been the case, that we have Aboriginal title here. And so filing this claim was really merely about a recognition. So when we first filed the claim back last year, we were merely seeking a declaration of Aboriginal title, no other remedies or compensation. And so over the past year, the province had concerns over who this was going to affect. So we amended our claim, or not actually amended it, but we filed a new claim. And this new claim, as you know, names the largest corporate forestry companies, as well as NB Power, and as well as now seeking compensation for loss of lands. So those are the two new things that were added to this new claim. And that was really done for clarity on the province's part. And unfortunately, they didn't read the claim as soon as it was filed, before they started to make unfounded accusations as to what this would mean to not only the economy of the province, but to regular New Brunswickers.
So Premier Higgs and Minister Holland have made some comments about the title claim that you've taken issue with. So specifically, the Premier has suggested that the Wolastoqey Nations are interested in taking over businesses and running them themselves.
It is a claim for title to 60% of the province's land. These are lands that they would like to control in some form through ownership and perhaps even operating the businesses that currently own and operate on those lands.
What's your response to that?
Well, clearly that's not true. And I mean, number one, if you read the claim itself, we're not seeking to run these businesses. We're seeking the land back from those businesses. We're actually hoping that these businesses continue, because the last thing we want to see is the crashing of the economy or bankrupting this province, because that's not our goal. We live here. We live with the settlers here. We want to continue that. But unfortunately, we've been excluded from important decision makings when it's coming to the future of the property, the future of the land. So we don't want to run forestry companies. That's not at all what we want to do. We want to be involved. We want to be partners. We want to have a say. We want to protect this land for future generations. Sitting back, not being called to the table, we've witnessed, the land being just totally stripped of the forestry and mining and the effects that it actually has on the earth, causes not only the Indigenous people of this province and in our territory concerned, but regular New Brunswickers are concerned about that. But the profits from these companies seem to be more important in the immediate day today than looking down into the future. How is this going to affect us? And we've seen the effects of climate change, not just locally, but across the globe. And what happens when you do these types of things to the land? So, our concern is not only about the land as well, but about being partners, about the respect and the recognition. We've constantly been pushed aside and, looked at as sort of a group that doesn't really have a say. And if you go back into history, you only have to go back and see how we've been marginalized. And this is all about truth and reconciliation as well. So we're looking at getting to the truth, getting to the recognition and reconciliation. And it's about the province giving us the respect that they should be, because they are not even recognizing the important role that we play as stewards of the land. So it's really important that we assert ourselves, because, and why now? Well, we've pretty much been pushed into a corner because the province really doesn't think we have a say. And according to Canadian law, constitutional law, we do. And so we're only asserting the rights and the responsibilities that are ours.
You've kind of preempted my next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because I think you might have more to say. The Wolastoqey Nations have always acted to protect their traditional territory, to protect the land, to protect the water. I'm thinking about the Sisson mining project, for example. So what it sounds like you're saying is that this title claim is just an extension, a continuation of that work to protect our traditional territory.
Absolutely. I mean, we are the Wolastoqey people, which means, and in the Wolastoqey language, it means people of the beautiful and bountiful river. So we connect ourselves to the land. We connect ourselves to the river. And that's important. That's an important part of the culture, of our culture, that shows that we come from this land. Why would we hurt the thing that we basically name ourselves after? And so, it is important. It is an important factor. But at the same time, we don't want to see the end of the economy, because we do know that forestry is the backbone of the economy of this province. We just want to be included in the decision-making process with the goal of protection, with the goal of seeing the future down the road as to how this land will be there for us and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and our great-great-grandchildren. And that's important. It's extremely important that we always think about that. And again, like, we just have to look at the floods that occurred in British Columbia and the floods that have occurred in Nova Scotia. These are climate change results, the results of climate change. So for us, it's important that we, we're recognized as these partners. And it's unfortunate that we haven't been recognized as partners before, because, we won't, and as Chief Ross said before me, we won't treat our partners the way they've been treating us. We want to work together. We know that we are all living here together. We need to work together, and that respect has to be there. And unfortunately, history has not shown it that way. In fact, the province has truly leaned towards these corporations and benefited them and worked for them, and not the people of New Brunswick and not the Indigenous inhabitants of this province. No, they've been working for these corporations. And unfortunately, this is the result. So we filed this claim to seek that recognition and to sit equally at the table as partners.
And so I'm hearing from you, central to the title claim are these practices of resource extraction on what is called Crown land. And you've talked a little bit about those extractive processes and the impacts that they're having on this beautiful territory that is Wolastoqey territory. And you've talked about partnerships and the partnerships that the Wolastoqey nations want to have with the province in deciding what happens to Wolastoqey territory. The territory named in the title and the rest of the province is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, which sets out that this land was never ceded, and that there is to be a nation-to-nation relationship between the Wolastoqey, Mi'kmaq, Pescataway, and the Crown. And so in your view as chief, where the treaties are respected, what does a New Brunswick look like? Where the treaties are respected and where the Wolastoqey are a partner in these decision-making processes?
Well, we see this as a province that looks better than what it is now. The last thing we want to do is create uncertainty. As I said previously, we don't want to break the economy. We want to be better. We feel that being part of this will be better. As stewards to the land, we will ensure its protection. And that's one of the major parts of this claim. And it is, the treaties recognized our rights to this land. The treaties never ceded or surrendered our land. And the Canadian government, the Canadian law, the Canadian Constitution has, laid out a test for what Aboriginal title is. And that's all we're doing. We're following Canadian law. And so, that's really the key, I think, to understand. This isn't something that we're just trying to poke a hole in. This is law that has developed over 40, 50 years within this country and then protected by the Constitution. And that's sort of, that's really where we're going. And I think that we see New Brunswick as being a better place with this. And unfortunately, the fear mongering that has occurred has really has put us at opposite ends and made this very, very adversarial. Now, of course, any legal challenge is adversarial, but we're more than happy to sit down and negotiate with the province on an equal footing if they can just come out and admit and understand Canadian constitutional law and say, you know what, you're right here. Let's sit down and talk. Let's see what we can do together. Let's see how we can improve this province together. And that's really what it's about.
If it's okay with you, we'll follow the theme of fear-mongering. One of the claims that has been made is that with this title claim, the homes and farms of everyday New Brunswickers are at risk. Right? And I know you've said it, and other chiefs have said it again and again in the media, but I do think it bears repeating one more time why that's not the case.
Well, if you read the title claim, sections 2 and 3 lay it out very clearly. If you are not named in this claim, you have nothing to worry about. So, those two sections, and those two paragraphs are really not long. It's like half a page. It doesn't take much to read them. We use the term strangers to the claim, which means if you're not named in here, you're a stranger to this claim and you have nothing to worry about. And that's specifically filed in our statement of claim. So the fact that the province is going out and saying, oh, this is going to affect you. Well, it's not going to affect your property because we're not going after your property. And it's not going to affect the economy because we're not planning on shutting down all of these corporations. Our plan is to work with them to create more stability because right now, and in the past, there has been instability because of that underlying Aboriginal title that exists. So let's clarify that. Let's get it all out in the open. Let's make some stability and let's move forward. So it won't affect your everyday New Brunswickers. We're not going after homes. We're not going after farms. In fact, even, it was made clear by our legal team that we're not even going after infrastructure. So where there is, where there's like homes or businesses and that may belong to these corporations, we're not going after that. We want the land back that was given for free. That's basically forestry land. Because if we just go back and get Crown land, there isn't enough Crown land in our territory to practice our Aboriginal and treaty rights. So we're going after, a huge portion, 1/5 of our territory is owned by these corporations that they got for nothing, practically. So if you got it for nothing, it's not a big deal to get it back, right? And that's really what we're saying here. So it's not going to affect everyday New Brunswickers. We're not going after your homes. We're not going after your businesses. There was a comment about the Mactaquac Dam and NB Power. It's not going to affect electricity rates. That's not what it's about. That's the last thing we want to see. The last thing we want to see is people having to pay more and being resentful over it, because that's not what it's about. And again, we can't lay out everything that we're never going to do in the future in a title claim.
Sure.
If you think about it, I can't sit here and say, next week, I'm not going to go to your house for dinner. And then say, well, we didn't say we were going to do that. And then you say, well, you didn't say you weren't either.
Yeah.
You can't, it doesn't work in the negative. And unfortunately, the province has focused on that.
Right.
At the same time, we laid it very clear. We're not after people's homes, and we don't want to kick everyone out. We live here together. We've lived here together all our lives, and since contact, and we want to continue doing that in partnership and friendship. And the last thing we need is more fear-mongering to create this racist sort of reaction that just rose its head when we laid this claim. Instead of coming and talking to us, this is what they had to do. And it's kind of built up. The relationship with the province has built up to this point where we didn't feel we could sit down and talk to them about anything, because we've continuously been pushed aside, and just really seen as an annoyance to this particular government.
Yeah. And that you are preempting all of my questions, which is great. No, it's good. This title claim is going to take years to resolve. And there is a lot of anti-Indigenous racism that has arisen in response to the title claim. Lots of folks support what the Wolastoqey Nations are doing, but there is also this anti-Indigenous racism, both offline and online. What can settlers and everyday New Brunswickers, who are also treaty people, as you said, we all live here together, do to support the Wolastoqey Nations in the hard work that is this title claim, and in the ongoing work of protecting your territory?
Well, the very first thing would be, learn a little bit about the history, learn a little bit about the Canadian constitutional system, and even learning about Aboriginal title and how it differs, say, from a specific land claim or a comprehensive land claim. Learn about these things. It's an opportunity to educate yourself on current law and history, and become allies, to support the First Nations in what's the Canadian law has laid out for us. And that's really, I think, an important aspect of what New Brunswickers can do. Understand, because when you don't understand, your immediate reaction is to form an opinion of that's based on past experiences. So, but if people can learn more and educate themselves more, they'll see and understand, but also learn more about climate change, learn more about the forestry sector. It's an opportunity for New Brunswickers to educate themselves about the history of their province, the history of Indigenous people, and not just the history of Indigenous people, but how we live today. And why do we live the way we do today? A lot of questions are simple questions that people just assume everyone knows is, why are we living on reserves? Right. if this is your traditional territory, what's the difference between the reserves? Where did the reserves come from? How did that come about? Learn more about the Indian Act. Learn more about how we've lived, how there's an act in Parliament that dictates our lives from the day we're born to the day we die. And that no other sector of people in this country have to deal with that. There is no Chinese act. There's no, Asian act, so to speak, or there's no European act. There is an Indian act that deals with a group of people. And that's just crazy. That's just, and what? But why? Why is that? And you have to understand that to understand where we are today and why we're unique and different, as opposed to just, general racism across the board against, visible minorities or immigrants. That racism is there. We understand that, but our situation is different. And that has to be, that's something, take it as an opportunity to educate and learn more, instead of just, forming opinions based on minimal knowledge, and understanding what do they want? What do these Wolastoqey people want?
Is there anything you'd like to add, sort of as a parting note? I mean, I think go out, for settlers, everyday New Brunswickers, go out, educate yourself, learn about the both history of the Wolastoqey people, but also the present, right? But is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd like to add that, we're at a point with this government that we didn't necessarily have to be at. And I think we do realize that a court litigation will take years or decades. But if we don't go the litigation route, and we decide to sit down and negotiate, that also will take time. Things don't happen quickly. We need to sort of understand each other, lay out, the principles, lay out the positions, and move forward from there. But it's all about the recognition, and I think that there's hope. There's hope that we will negotiate this and not have to see it in the courts for decades, because that's expensive. There's another reason that this has taken so long, because unfortunately, you need monetary resources to go to court. Everybody knows that it costs money to go to court. And this is something that, we're fortunate enough that we're able to do, because it's the right thing to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have to be in court. We're very, very open to sitting down with this government, and maybe if it's not this government, maybe it'll be the next one. Maybe the next government will realize, no, we're not going to go down that route, because we're here, and I'm going to say we are here because of this government. And in particular, I do want to say we're here because of Premier Higgs. I don't know what all of his other, the other MLAs, his caucus, I don't know what they're thinking, because they don't speak up. We hear from him and a few of his chosen, cabinet members, but where are all the other MLAs who put him in power? Because I truly believe that if there was another premier or another government, we may not be here. And I know that's a very bold thing to say, but my experience has been totally that, because this government refuses to recognize our rights, refuses to recognize our title and our position here, and it has brought us to this point.
And I think that, please.
Hope.
Yes, I would say, I feel like you've ended on a hopeful note, a note that holds those in power to account, right? And that looks towards a hopeful future where negotiation is possible, and where that partnership that you've identified is practiced in a real way that respects the treaties.
And it's important. The partnership is the most important thing, because we all live here and none of us are going anywhere. So we need to work it out. I think we will leave it there. Thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, and for meeting us when you are very, very busy. So we look forward to following this historic title claim and uncovering more of this issue. Thank you so much. For the perspective of woodlot owners and farmers on the title claim, we're going to Daimen, Hardie, and Gareth Davies.
My name's Gareth Davies, and I am a forestry professional and a small farmer and woodlot owner. I live with my family and my wife Rebecca and 4 children in Stanley, New Brunswick, up in the hills of central New Brunswick in the Upper Nashwauk. We live on a 110-acre farm woodlot where we have a small farm, mixed farm business, and we have a woodlot that we manage for timber production and for wildlife habitat and old forest conditions and a variety of other things. So I wouldn't use the word reckless, personally. I know why people do. When people look out at the landscape and see the way it's being managed, if they don't like the way it looks or if they're not directly benefiting from it, I can see why people think it's reckless. And certainly from a First Nations perspective, I'm not an Indigenous person. I have close friends that are. They have certainly been excluded from that entire process, whether it's the management process of determining how our lands and forests are managed and how our ecosystems are managed, or from benefiting from it in any direct economic and social way. We've been managing public land in New Brunswick, the government has, to serve the needs of industry primarily, right? Based on the notion that supply of resources, a continuous and sustaining guaranteed supply of resources, is the best use of our public land to guarantee, industry, employment, all the socio-economic benefits that flow from that. Whether that's the best way to manage our forests for New Brunswickers, and whether First Nations peoples would agree that that's the best way to manage our forests is a whole other question. But I think we're actually really good at sustainably growing and producing wood in this province. Really good, like world leaders as far as that goes. Yeah. But whether that's should be the dominant purpose and objective in the management of our public land is a whole other question. Whether we should be managing public land in partnership with First Nations and whether they should have a share in not only determining how that land is managed and for what reasons, they should certainly also receive a share of any revenue that's generated from it, clearly, as a function of their legal rights under the Constitution of Canada and the treaties that are in place between the country of Canada, the province of New Brunswick, and those First Nations. Whether or not my livelihood is threatened here, I certainly don't have any reason to believe so. I don't think that fear-mongering is helping any of us other than dividing us. And reconciliation is very important to me and my family. And I'd like to think and hope that it's important to New Brunswickers and Canadians in general. We are certainly ethically and morally and legally obligated, from my perspective, to manage our public lands in this part of the world in partnership with First Nations. There's no question in my mind about that.
I grew up here in southeast New Brunswick, in the Mi'kmaq district of Sicknick, and my family has some forest here, and that's actually where I live. I know that people who do rely on the forest for a living, especially small family forest owners, have been facing increasing challenges to that, largely because, the markets and the policies are really dominated by the biggest industrial corporations, the biggest, most powerful companies. And that just makes it harder for smaller operators to get a good price, to be, flexible in what they do with their forest. So it's become quite difficult for small family forest owners to make a living. This title claim is fundamentally about the Wolastoqey Nation trying to take care of their communities, establish their legal rights, and enjoy the benefits from the forest that they've enjoyed for thousands of years that's just been taken away more recently. I don't think it's a threat at all. I actually think that it could benefit small family forest owners because it will affect some positive change in a situation that really is only benefiting the few and the largest, most powerful industrial companies right now. We've got communities that are underfunded, right, in different ways. We've got this beautiful forest and all these rivers that are being destroyed. They're in decline. As I talked about earlier, we've got small family forest operators that are increasingly marginalized because the markets and policies are dominated by these large industrial corporations. And we've got now the situation with the climate crisis. So we need healthy forests now more than ever, both for the carbon that they store, but also the local protection they provide to nearby communities. And they can only do that if the forests are healthy. And right now, the situation is only really benefiting these big, powerful industrial corporations, and it's sort of leaving everyone else behind. And the government is complicit in that in a lot of ways. You know, over the past year, we saw the price of lumber just skyrocket, and these large companies were making historical all-time record-breaking profits. And the province didn't even increase royalties, didn't even increase the small amount that they're currently asking these companies to pay for the wood that they're harvesting, and left something like $200 million of potential revenue for New Brunswickers, you know, with those companies. And then meanwhile, like I'm here in Sackville, we've got a hospital that can't even run normal hours and you know, keep the right services in place. So really the situation is really not benefiting all citizens. It's not fair. And the Wolastoqey Nation in New Brunswick, they're pushing for justice and fairness. And I think anytime a group does that, it benefits the majority. And so I would really encourage people to, you know, question those more fear-based messages that are coming out from the province, and really listen to what the Wolastoqey Nation in New Brunswick is saying, and think about, you know, the struggle that they're undertaking, and think about getting behind them, because I think it can really benefit New Brunswick as a whole if we do that.
And that's all for today. Thanks so much for joining us. The NB Debrief is a partnership between the NB Media Co-op and CHCO-TV. You can email us at nbdebrief@chco.tv. Thanks so much.
No downtown is from this town, long walk, long and clean now. Yes, it is, yes, it is, yes, it is. Company keeps on the phone to me, they say, it's our city, our town. Sure it is, sure it is, sure it is.